Today we have a very special guest who is a disabled veteran and was fired from the VA in the name of so-called budget cuts. More on that in a second here. You're going to see this on the CivDiv and Veterans InfoTap and Veterans Daily, and this veteran chooses to remain anonymous. So for that reason, we're going to call him Chris. All right. So Chris, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let us know like what branch you were in, what you did in whatever branch, whatever military service, and then and then transition to when you started at the VA, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Sure. My name is Chris. I was an Air Force officer for 7 years, from 92 to 99. My job duties were primarily operations as an operations officer, but I did stuff like search and rescue and ground operations and training operations. I left in 99. I worked for 20 years in the private sector, just trying to climb the corporate ladder. And then in 2020, I decided, I wanted some more work-life balance and figured I'd, get some use out of the 7 years that I was in the Air Force so I could attach it to the federal government, do some federal service, and retire with a pension and, when I'm ready to retire. And that all came to a screeching halt on Friday.
Wow. Chris, I got a question for you. So thank you for your service, first of all, first and foremost. That's awesome. 7 years officer. I mean, that in itself, you're able to then build on. You've done your civilian sector. And like a lot of people, you start looking for ways to, okay, let me see if I can leverage my 7 years of federal time and get that to build upon. So that all makes sense to me. That's a very valid direction for folks. As you entered into the federal workforce, one, how long ago was that? Like, when did you apply? What attracted you to it, other than the retirement PERS aspect of it? Besides that, what attracted you to the VA? What kind of a role, a job was it in the VA? What did that hiring process look like? Were there any pauses or freezes along that hiring process as well?
So I started with a different agency in Boston in 2020, and I, no lie, applied to over 1,200 positions on east of the Mississippi River. So I was living in Florida. I was not getting anywhere, even with a veteran status. So I applied, I broadened my horizons outside of Florida, ended up with a job in Boston. Relocated to Boston during COVID in 2020, and I did really well there. I got 4s and 5s on my ratings and my reviews. 4 is 5 is the highest. It goes 1 through 5, and there really wasn't any room for a promotion. I started as a GS-11, so I looked for promotion opportunities, and I wanted to come back to Florida anyway, because I was tired of the Boston winters. So I came back to Florida last March. I took a GS-10 position as a VSR with the Veterans Benefits Administration. So I was learning how to do that role. And during that training, I learned that that position wasn't for me. It wasn't something that I really enjoyed. So I looked for other opportunities. I got a GS-12-13 position promotion in September, and with the current position that I'm in now. So I then, in order to get that GS-12 position, I applied for, again, positions all over the place because they're not easy. The process isn't simple. You have to, you have all these credentials. While I was in the private sector, I also got a master's degree back in 2010, and that took me 4 years. So, Air Force officer, disabled veteran, master's degree, and still, all these hurdles that I had to go through to just land. I only had essentially 3 weeks left from the time that I was terminated to meet my probation period.
No, I see.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. So there's two things that I want to bring up. One's off the cuff, and I apologize for not giving you a heads up because it is news to me. But first, so you were almost finished with your probationary period, which sucks. And, people were asking me, like, why am I taking it so personal? Because I've definitely had a very personal view on this one specifically, it's because my probationary period ended January 3rd of this year. So, 3 weeks on the other side,
Yeah.
I would have been in the same boat. So that's why I'm taking it personal. And two, totally off the cuff here, you said you were VSR and it wasn't for you. Can you explain that as fast as you can? Because that is very interesting to me, and it's very relevant for our channels as well. Why didn't you like being a VSR?
For multiple reasons. So I came from a consulting firm. I worked at 2 different consulting firms for 20 years prior to joining the federal government. And as a VSR, I just noticed there was so much inefficiency. Here's a perfect example. My training was supposed to start on March 9th. March 9th of last year. They forced me to rush down from Boston. Said if I'm not here by March 11th, my job will be forfeited. On March 11th, I started, and they said, "Oh, sorry, your training's now been postponed till June." So from March until June, I had nothing to do. So I'm like, okay, who is monitoring this? Who is watching all of this? Why are, I'm happy that I was still getting a paycheck, but as a taxpayer and looking inward, that was annoying to me.
Yeah.
Why is this type of waste just happening?
Right.
Yeah. And then on top of that, there was a floor, on the 3rd floor, all this empty workspace. It's like, okay, why isn't this workspace being rented out or closed down? Because, now the government is paying an electric bill and water bill for all this empty space. And, it's Florida, so there's an electric bill year round with air conditioning. So that was number one. Number two, all the inefficiencies of the process, so much manual and tedious work that could be automated. Just my opinion.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to get comments about automation. Go ahead, Jason.
Right. Now, I know that you weren't in that role for very long, but could you, if you reached the level of here's the metrics that we're going to rate you on as far as your position is concerned, like this is what you have to do. Was there any discussion about what you were expected to accomplish in that role?
Yes, and I don't remember the exact metrics, but there were a certain amount of cases that we had to review on a certain period of time. And honestly, I just don't see how that would even be attainable.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
So basically what...
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is that you were told that there was a certain level of cases that you had to get through within a certain amount of time, and you are feeling because you don't remember the exact number, but you remember feeling like that's just not even a feasible number to attain. To be adequately, appropriately reviewing these things, you can't really hit that number. So the only way people would be able to hit it would be to cut corners, so to speak. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's basically what I'm kind of hearing from you.
Yeah. So to me, it felt like because the numbers are so unattainable that people would end up cutting corners just to reach those metrics. And,
it ain't so. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so on top of, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Sorry, I'm old.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. And I really want to transition into like the nuts and bolts of this interview. Is what was it like being fired? And I'm not going to say, being fired sucks. That's the obvious answer. But from when, hey, I'm going to work tomorrow to I'm not going to work tomorrow anymore. What was that process like? I really want to know if your supervisors knew that you had gotten fired or if it came from like top down.
So here's the interesting thing. The interesting thing is I already scheduled to have Friday off. So I planned on having a 4-day weekend. I was reading on Reddit that on Thursday night around 11 o'clock that 1,000 employees on probation in the VA have been terminated. I'm like, seriously? So I logged onto my computer, and sure enough, saw an email timestamped, I think 8 p.m. My shift ended at 4:30. So they sent an after-hours email saying that my position was eliminated effective immediately. So that was around 11 o'clock. No, it was 11:45, because I emailed my manager and my HR person right away. At 12:15, my HR person called me, and she said, sorry for calling so late, but she said, it's my understanding that if I were to apply for the deferred resignation, where you would get paid and all your benefits till September 30th, that they would still honor it, but it has to be done by midnight on the 13th. I said, well, it's 12:15, so that's not even an option. So Friday morning, once my manager got the email, he called me and he said, this is ridiculous. This was supposed to happen only to people who had issues with performance. He said my performance was excellent. He wrote an email saying, in case I need it for future reference, I'm an excellent employee, blah, blah, blah. So he then later called me back and gave me some verbiage to send to HR to respond to that email. And I did that. He said he's going to follow up with his SES management to see if there's a way to get this reversed. I did receive an email an hour ago, a response that has been escalated to 2 different levels in HR. My manager's been in the process, and they're looking into if I should have been terminated or not. So that's where everything stands right now.
Yeah, there's definitely a glass half full there.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even have anything to say other than that really sucks, and I'm sorry. Jason, do you have any thoughts on that?
I look, it does suck. Obviously, exhaust all the opportunities that you have to counteract that. The one thing that I think that's interesting for folks that are watching this that aren't aware of the federal government as far as being an employee with it is the fact that you first became a federal employee, if I remember right, in 2020. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
And you're right. So and that's the point.
No break in service. So go ahead.
Right. So I think that people who read the headlines out there assume that this was your first federal job. You've been on the books for less than a year, and now you're just terminated. I don't think that a lot of people fully grasp that you've been a federal employee and you've just moved positions within the federal government for whatever the reason. It really doesn't matter. So that's a hard pill to swallow, I think, for an employee in that situation. Versus, and I don't mean to sound harsh, but versus an employee that maybe they just got their feet in the door, and then it's like, hey, look, we're overstaffed, things got messed up, and we got to let you go. Still sucks, but I think it's a different level of stuck, if you know what I mean.
No, especially since in June I would have had my 5 years, so I am 4 weeks, essentially 4 months away from being eligible to collect a pension. So
right.
That's the crappiest part about all of this.
Right. And so for those listening, what he's talking about is the vesting period. Once you hit the 5-year mark of federal employment, you are then eligible for your FERS, which is Federal Employee Retirement System. You're eligible for that retirement. Now, granted, if you retired after 5 years, it's a small amount, but it is an amount nonetheless. And obviously, you would have continued to probably work and build on top of that. My question for you, Chris, is, was there anything other than the shock of being told that your position is now eliminated in the initial email? Is there anything that you remember in that was a little bit shocking on the reasoning why, or was it just very blank and vanilla?
So the reasoning said performance, which isn't true. And my manager, when my manager read that, he responded and said, "This is not true. It has nothing to do with performance. That is a lie." So,
Yeah, man. Few things on that, and the 5-year thing. I mean, it depends because I assume you bought back your time. I think
I
you had
did. So
that. Yeah, so it kind of
my
changes
my
the
my
year amount.
buyback time only counts once I hit the 5 years with the federal government. So I have to get that 5-year minimum, and then my 7 years with the Air Force would count.
Yep. Okay, tracking.
Yep.
Now to wrap this up, and we know you didn't get severance, and what's new to me is that the email was based on performance that I did not know. So that is new information to me. And then if you had good performance, one, it sounds like you had good management because
Yep.
they're fighting for you. And looking at the glass half full, that's really good. But it appears to me that the decision came from top down, and it's a number issue, not a person issue,
Right.
which is my problem with it in the first place. Now, to wrap this up all together, and this is for you and any of the other VA employees that were fired, about 1,000 plus. You have free access to this resume builder, Brad Tatchy, over on LinkedIn. I'm going to leave these links down below in the description. He'll help you build a resume. It's open for 2 weeks, which is about 12 days as of right now. This is going to be posted. So if that's you, get it in there. Even if you don't need it, you can at least use like a tailored resume for this thing over here, and then a tailored resume for something else over here, whatever it is. But that's really all I have to say. Now, I do want to give the floor to you, Chris. Is there anything you want to say? And then when you're finished, just go ahead and close it out.
Yeah, I just want to say, for the first time in my life, I have to apply for unemployment. I've always had a job lined up before leaving another job. I've always been fiscally responsible that way. I've never been fired. And now suddenly, with all this rhetoric about how federal employees are lazy, now I'm being forced out of a job and forced onto state programs to, be a burden on the taxpayers, which makes zero sense.
Mm-hmm. Jason, did you have anything?
Yeah, I just want to throw out there that the biggest thing that is disturbing, right, is the new information that came out. And we can only assume at this point, right, we could be wrong, but we could assume that the messaging in the email was purely based on performance, and that the performance levels weren't at the needed requirements, and therefore, sayonara. And that is that's going to be a problem on the HR side for anybody who has had zero performance issues. Now, my kind of final thought, unless you have anything else, Clay. No? All right. So my final thought here is continue to push. And you know what? If you get any sort of positive feedback or any relative feedback during this process, please reach back out to Clay or myself, because we'd love to do a follow-up. There's other people that might be in the same position as you, I would imagine. And if they're watching this and they didn't know that they should reach out to their HR person because their performance is well, or has been well, then they need to do that. But with that, thank you so much, Chris, for coming on board. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. Thank you to the CivDiv for putting this together. I appreciate partnering up with you on this, and thanks for allowing that. You're a solid rock star. And if folks on my channel aren't subscribed with the CivDiv, please do so. With that, thanks so much for watching. We appreciate every single one of you. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.